We have to get your directive reading. You see about 55.
I should just sit here. Is it okay if I just sit there?
Yeah.
So we get to hear each other. Okay. Well, you will be aware of my latest version.
Yeah.
And I have a few steps since that point.
No, tell us what you're doing.
Okay. We'll go to the top. Okay. So the topic, I realize that this research thing is a real cyclic thing because I've gone around in circles and sometimes I've come back the same way.
I think you're
from
getting
different
lost with what is independent, what is independent.
No, I think I have.
You have it now.
I have an idea.
No.
But let me present my state of mind right now, and we could probably fix it there. I won't be able to take notes, unfortunately, because I value the feedback.
Yeah.
But I guess it will be captured on the video. Okay, so the topic I have at this point is implementation of national policy, a comparison of the National Information and Communication Technology Policy of Trinidad and Tobago during the period 2003 and 2008 with a comparative country, and in brackets I may consider Jamaica. Okay. But that may be jumping the gun to choose a country at this point. So in my description in my introduction I described that in 2003 there was a national ICT plan. Actually, there wasn't a plan, there wasn't a policy, and there wasn't a strategy. A document was produced which contained all of it in one, and it went further to develop action plans. Mm-hmm. So one of my challenges would be that if I'm going to focus on policy, I'm going to have to extract the policy from that. One of the shortcomings in it is that there was no national development policy. The Vision 2020 had not yet been born, and the follow-up by the USA, of course, had never come into place. So the questions that came to my mind were, how could you create a national ICT policy outside the context of a national policy? But I do have contact with the chief engineer and some of the people involved in the process, and I was on the periphery of things, so I can glean some of it. And the response is that there's a medium-term development program, the rolling 3-year plan that formed significant context of it. And to answer a question you asked earlier, what motivated it? It turns out, the information so far is revealing that Trinidad was ahead of the rest of the world in developing ICT plans, national ICT plans. Okay. And in fact, the person who was the chief engineer here left here, went to Commonwealth Secretariat, and used the approach in Trinidad as the approach to sell to ComSec, which then snowballed so that the developmental agencies like UN and World Bank, I'm seeing references to that. So this person went to Mauritius and to other countries and used this as the seed for the methodology for other countries around the world. So we were ahead of the game.
You're sure?
This is what he's telling me. I'm telling you based on the information I have so far.
But you've seen anything with?
I asked him for that, and well, he had to leave the country for the last week.
Who is this person?
I have his name. I have in the same file. I have my conversation with him. When I'm on the phone, I write down the Vinjaram.
I wonder if he exaggerating.
Well,
I can't believe that a third world country will lead the rest of the world.
Well, it's not quite as clean as that. He was hired on contract by the Ministry of Public Administration to deal with this, to deal with ICT. Now, it was he's telling me that it was Patrick Manning who had this vision to create a national ICT plan. So it was Patrick Manning would have handled.
But it must have come from somewhere.
Right. Well, this is the story as I
see. He's telling you.
Right. So Patrick Manning told it to his chief, his right-hand man, which was Minister Safe. Safe would have given the instruction to his PSs, and I have the names of the PSs. Jackie Wilson.
You know what you have to do? You have to do a search and find out if the ICT plans, what year they were put in different countries.
Timelines.
Timelines.
So far, my readings.
If this information is correct,
Yeah.
then this could go in part of your thesis. It's like colonial striking back. Is it like the colonizer striking back? Is what you're telling me. So if you could get an idea of the timelines that this thing was introduced, then we'll see a reversal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It might be interesting reading.
I just want to ask.
I will document those things, but so far from my readings, the other countries that started to do this, their timelines would have been like a year or two after ours.
Well, show that.
What I wanted to ask about two things. With regard to the impetus, like why would Patrick know that?
You know, you talk about the push factors.
Yeah,
What are the push factors?
Because normally with us, we are policy takers, right? And we tend to be very reactionary. We don't have any, I'm sorry to say, but we don't tend to be forward thinking or proactive. So in most instances, when you see a policy being implemented, it's because the powers that be, politicians, policymakers, have someone pushing them to do it. It could have been he was self-driven, self-motivated, he wanted to see.
But we wouldn't think it about the blue.
But this is it. What would make him think? Would he be able to interview Patrick Murphy?
Yeah, I think you should interview
Exactly.
Patrick
I think we
Murphy.
should try and interview.
To get that timeline, if that is correct in terms of the timeline you see it, if that is correct, that's a whole different
That'd be so cool.
swing on your thesis, you know.
Okay.
You know that would be such a critical part of the
That'd be
thesis.
so cool.
You could send me in a slightly different direction to the one I'm in.
No,
currently,
you're
but that's
still in
fine.
the same direction, but you're adding that.
A dimension.
You're adding a dimension that now has a body of literature, that this is a third world country. And this is setting the pace in other countries. And we have to find explanation why this was happening. But it's a whole new chapter going to be developed around that. So I think you need to interview Mr. Manning.
Or at least, let me say, or maybe all of them.
But they are living now, so you
Yeah,
know.
but you have to gather your questions in a way that you will get what you want.
Yeah.
So you do your structured questions.
That body of literature would be so good.
That would be a useful chapter. So let's hear you again.
So I can document those timelines. So I scoured literature. I sometimes feel like I'm a headless chicken, or I'm a man on a big ocean liner trying to sail this thing by myself. Because
But
I find myself
isn't it exciting?
It is exciting.
It's like this treasure hunt. You're not alone in that. The PhD is this treasure hunt.
Right, but I'm on a big sailboat with multiple sails, and
But you are the
run
captain,
from this sail to that sail.
But remember, you are the captain.
I'm the captain.
And you make and everything, you cook everything.
So, so I scoured some literature using the search engine and so on to look for, with your guidance, the challenges faced in implementing ICT policies. And I found a whole list of about 20 odd, all from the literature.
And has a foundation literature.
Yes. Those that
Because remember, that is the review of the academic literature now that you have to give it to.
Right.
Directly reading.
Those 16 or 18 that I found, they came from the documents. Three of them are academic, and one was a report on Trinidad's.
Let's hear the challenges.
Okay, and I chose two to be the focus of my study. Okay, here it is. Some of them may be overlapping, okay, but I get a list, not worry about whether it's clean or not. Poor enabling environment is, and in brackets I have comprised of legislation, relevant strategies, policies, and regulations in the first instance, as well as the allocation of resources, mobilization of investment, and the establishment of partnerships with key stakeholders, including academia and research institutions, industry and civil society at the national, regional, and international level. So, poor enabling environment is the first one. Second, absence of clear prioritization and resource allocation, limited measurement or availability of data, absence of clear cooperation mechanisms, inadequate coordination and cooperation among government agencies, limited availability of funding for ICT initiatives. ICT policy and planning is needed across government ministries to ensure a more cohesive approach to ICT employment. So that should read lack of policy and planning, lack of, and then so that oversight, and lack of sufficient consideration for managing the human aspect of change. Despite sound technical implementation, common projects have been challenged by fears and perceptions at the lower levels, resulting in limited buy-in. Insufficient availability of persons with the required skills and experience within the government system. Inability of government to attract quality vendors / consultancies with sufficient competence and capacity to execute ICT projects. 11. The tendency of government bureaucracies to operate in silos, causing majority issues, and I have A and a B. A is the need for sequencing and synchronization, arranging priorities in the execution of the ICT plan, properly identifying issues that are prerequisites to other initiatives and issues that need to be addressed simultaneously by several agencies.
I think you could, you know what you could do? You could subsume many of those under major subheadings. Like for instance, I remember when you started talking about the second one, you're talking about prioritization. So it's a project management kind of thing you're talking about.
Right.
So you could subsume many of those points under some subheadings.
Right. So I have let me see, 26 of those that I got from literature, and then there were about 6 or 8 that I got from you.
But put them together.
Right. And you asked if I have a concept of variables. No, this is a mishmash of independent and intervening variables. So from these, I've chosen, I only read about half so far. From these, I chose 2 that I believe are the most significant ones. The first one is leadership at multiple levels. And the second one is, I wrote it when I sent it to you as stakeholder engagement.
Okay.
But I've immersed myself in the past 2 weeks in this body of information I got from, have you ever heard of MOOC? Massive open online course by Coursera. There's one currently in process on citizen engagement.
Okay.
And I've immersed myself in that, and I've discovered a distinction between citizen engagement and stakeholder engagement.
It's 2 different things.
Right, and the piece that I'm attracted to is there's a
the stakeholder engagement will be what you could focus on.
right, but the thing is, I am convinced in my gut that citizen engagement is more significant.
Why? If you're talking about citizen engagement, we're talking about civil society.
That's right, yeah.
But why civil society is so important? Now you tell me, advise me, why it's so important for this project?
Well, and not just this project, I think all national policies. So there are multiple factors, push and pull factors. If you include the wider array of people in the development of the policy, first of all, you have input that you may not receive if you only focus on the key stakeholders, the primary stakeholders. Secondly, you create a conversation where people have the opportunity to buy into things. And then, third aspect of it is forewarn is forearm. So that if the wider population is aware of this new policy, they can embrace it more readily, and they can support it more readily.
Okay.
And if you make the information available, they can support it in more tangible ways. Because I spend a lot of time in the IT world, and there are a lot of people out there who are home at their computers and looking at information, and they do stuff. And if you give people the opportunity to do some of these things, they will support these things. And this material I'm reading on citizen engagement shows.
So you have a lot of foundation literature to support you?
There's a lot of writing that I've read, but a lot of that that's been available via this Coursera thing. Some of it is academic, but most of it is from World Bank and some international civil organizations. So I'm going to have to distill from that the pieces that I can use as academic
You
sources.
have some material on citizen.
I can get.
Yeah. Dr. Theodore is very good at that. So it would be useful to buffer that. No, I don't have a problem with that. Once you could set out to prove that this is it, then you'll be fine.
So that could be one of my hypotheses, that citizen engagement is, how should I articulate this?
Will be critical to the success of the implementation of any policy.
Right. And there's another deeper aspect. Citizen engagement would be more valuable, or would better support the implementation of policies than even simple stakeholder engagement. Right.
So you actually, you know what you're actually doing there, and I think it's useful. You're making a case that let us widen the net.
That's the point I want to.
Yeah.
So my hypothesis will be that citizen engagement will have I'll have to prove past tense, right? So I have to show that that citizen engagement had a better impact, a more positive impact on the implementation of the policy than stakeholder engagement.
But you think you could prove it in Jamaica?
Okay.
Now remember, you have to, if you're doing something comparing, you have to look at similar things occurring across. So I don't have a problem. So you're looking at leadership, and you're looking at citizen involvement. Those are your two variables you're looking at. Good.
I haven't done any searches beyond what I said to you on the leadership component of it. But that aspect of it,
you'll have a lot of theories in the literature. You'll have a lot of theories on the leadership. Lots of theories started back with Weber, going way back. Leadership is something that is well known. What you have to do is look at the theories of leadership, but what is applicable for your state? You know, that to me that's critical. You could look at, because you want the foundation. What is leadership? What you're probably looking at is as transformational leadership, which will come out in the work. How do you transform? Because if you're looking at reform, you're looking at a different kind of leader. So the leadership, I don't see a problem in terms of material coming out.
Sorry, I don't want to stop.
No, go ahead.
Now, in my frame, I came in as a practitioner, so I can see, I have my perspective on reality. And the leadership, for successful implementation of policy, will have to happen at multiple levels. What I would look for some guidance on is whether I should look at the whole range, because of the political leadership, there's the leadership inside at the head of ministries, at the senior levels, and then as you go down into the programs, strategies, programs, projects, you need leadership at these levels. And a failure of leadership at any one of these levels will result in a failure of implementation lower down.
No, how you think you think it should go up?
I think the difference is in terms of leadership.
No, but if he looks at political leadership and then looks at different kinds of leadership, I think it's a lot.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind, because I was thinking that it might be wise maybe to focus on one of the layers, either political or senior bureaucratic or lower down. But I would, because of the nature of this thing, I don't want to look lower down.
No,
so
I think you could focus on your middle level or senior level. And what you could look at, I think, to prove whether leadership is working or not, you could look at it in terms of a timeline. That this is an action plan, and certain things they would have given you, like a project management activity. This is supposed to happen in 3 months, 6 months, 5 months. And what you could do is actually timeline it to see why it didn't happen or why it happened. Is it, but then you have other variables, for instance, funding, staffing, things like that. But it's something that you could prove. You know, you want to make sure that the thesis is provable.
I was thinking with my thesis, when I did it, I did the levels too, but I stuck to
Senior bureaucratic?
No, I did it in terms of the national leadership policy, so I did it national, then I did it kind of at some national level, and I did it at the third level, so they were at the NGO level. So there's the supranational level, that's the policy level, the national
So the politicians?
and then you went down, and then the people who actually at that level, like the ministries and so on, and then you went to the
So you
NGOs.
do with PSs and director?
And I think we should stick to
We
that senior bureaucratic level, because when it starts being lower down, there are too many variables and something It's
Yeah.
too broad. It's too unmanageable at that stage to try to track what happens this time. But if you just say, okay, this is where I'm looking at PSs and even the political directorate, and then PSs and let's say, like let's say senior bureaucratic could mean anything, because there are contract positions and all of that. So we should stick to PSs or whoever the IT manager is, that kind of PS, IT manager, and stop. And let's be very clear. So you have a very clear idea who you're comparing across the board. You also have PS as IT manager, you know what I mean? So it's consistency. Because in some ministries they wouldn't have the lower level, so they'd be nothing low.
Or they will be moving.
Yeah,
they will be
moving
moving
them around.
Wendy, what do you think?
I just came in because I
Yeah, he's in his thing, he's looking at the national ICT implementation of the national ICT plan, and he brought up a very interesting thing. He said what he found, or his first interview is suggesting that the man is saying that I did this in Trinidad in 2003 under Mr. Manning, and then I went to the World Bank and I went to the other people, and on my plan then they implemented it throughout all the other countries, the Commonwealth. So that's one aspect that is interesting. But he is now looking at the challenges, and he's looking at two challenges. One, leadership as a challenge in terms of success, and two, civil society engagement. He wants to broaden from stakeholder to civil society, which there is a body of literature to support him. So what he was now wanting to know is what level of leadership he should focus. Political leadership will go into the realm of politics, and I don't want to have a thesis that straddles so many. And what Simon is suggesting, focus on the administrative side at the PS level. What do you think? Your focus is there too, yeah.
So we can have some conversation.
Yeah, because I also think too that political, the turbulence and the whole political climate now, when you look at Trinidad and the history, it really they dictate, and for you to start to read so far and look at, you saw it in 2003 under the Manning administration, what happened?
Yeah.
And then change.
You don't want to go into the
But you don't
politics.
want to go into the politics.
But
But it is important.
It's critical because one thing
It's important, but you don't want to make that your central focus, because it says that if the policy is good, it has continuity at the administrative level.
But we as practitioners, Simon, you could probably bear me out and use the word
Yeah.
policies. You don't have to wait for a change in administration. Once there's a reshuffle, reassignment of portfolios, and in my estimate, every 2 years you have a change of a minister. Once you have a change in a minister, the next one comes in and everything's on pause. Everybody below him or her says, well, we ain't moving on this until this minister says go ahead, because he or she may redirect. So, and I think that happens across the board.
But a bit of it will come in your discussion.
Yeah.
But let's not focus on political.
Yeah,
Okay.
keep it administrative.
Keep it administrative, keep it at the level of permanency. Good. What you seeing as your challenge now, Mr. Abarach?
Well,
You have a clear direction of where to go.
yeah.
What is your methodology going to be?
Well, I'm going to. Well, Simon has discussed with me that has shared with me that there are methodologies that focus on case studies, and if this is a case study of Trinidad, so I can use that methodology. Which I haven't read much on. I know it exists, so I can look that up.
You will be doing unstructured interviews.
Right.
You will not be doing a broad sample. You'll be doing very specific, selecting your audience, selecting specific people, because you're focusing on leadership.
From the key actors of the day.
You'll be focusing on key actors. So you'll be doing a lot of unstructured interviews.
Which is good for me, because it's an area of strength. I used to work in O&M, and that's what we used to do for a living.
Yeah.
So I can extract information from people's minds
Yeah.
in a fluid way. I think one of my challenges will be, and this is for me personally as a researcher, that is that we're speaking of these things. As I mentioned before, I came from the sciences. My A-levels were in the sciences, and so I think quantitatively, one challenge I think I'm going to have is to define how to measure the things that need to be measured. So how do you measure successful implementation of a policy? I can look for quantitative ways to do these things.
No, but you're using the quantitative.
Okay.
You're using the quantitative. It doesn't mean, you see, people get confused between quantitative. some people say, I will do a qualitative research. It has no at some point in your life there will be measurement.
Yes.
And that measurement will be quantitative. So people getting confused and say they think quantitative is only doing a big questionnaire. Not so. You will be using mixed method. You won't say only doing case study. Because that is sociology, anthropology. You will be looking at a case. So you're not doing a case study, you're looking at a case. This is your case. But you're using both qualitative and quantitative methodology. In terms of the assessment, you must see what the original document set out to do. You must see the timelines. And you can evaluate the success of that in what was the intent of that policy.
Right. So that can be done in the case of Trinidad, and that can be done in the case of Jamaica. But if you're doing a comparison, the policies may have set out to be doing slightly different things.
But then look at what is common for them. Look at the commonalities. You might see the differences, and you write about the differences. You don't sweep things under the carpet as a researcher. And you explain why the differences, probably it's a nuance in terms of the culture. But at the end of it now, when you get that material together, then when you're doing the comparison, you have to find the explanation. This is why I say it didn't happen. This is my hypothesis. I say leadership probably differs from Jamaica to Trinidad. I say that the engagement of the city, they did it differently. So you do have a thesis on that. So I think you're much clearer now. I'm not seeing your challenge. I think you think it through now. You have it very, very, very clear.
And something that helped me over the past 2 days was the video. I got the video footage. I went over one of the previous ones. And it turns out I was late for that session. It's a pity I was late for that session. One of the things you told us, while we're going through the literature review, have viewed them through the eyes of some themes. And in my what I realized, probably inadvertently, in my proposal to you, I had 2 sets of questions. One set was the questions that I would ask as I go through the literature review. So, and the other set were the set of questions the research itself will seek to answer. So I need to evolve this because with this new mindset, I'm going to have to polish the first set and then go through the literature probably again, because I would have extracted things, but just cut and paste the valuable pieces.
Yeah.
But that's not what a literature review is. It's going to have to be a discussion of the various pieces of literature spoke under this theme. So it's like I'm going to have to start from scratch. But the thing is, although I'm behind on the timeline I had in mind, I have a comfort because I know what to do for the next step.
I think I'm seeing the aha now coming through it. This aha moment, this breakthrough, where you don't need me again. I'm no longer breastfeeding.
At least not for the time being.
You're no longer breastfeeding. You're all right. I think all you have to do now, because the directed reading is critical now as far as Watson is concerned.
Yeah.
We have to complete your directed readings, which he is looking for about 35 pieces. Now, for me, it could be, guess you put in the name of your article, and you put in about a quarter, half page, what the article sought to do. For me, that will be sufficient. But that will inform to your academic review of the literature.
So it doesn't have to be in the format of literature review. It can be
No,
just,
not at this point.
Okay, I could have been forming that all along.
Not at this point, because the only person who's going to see your directed reading is me. Do it properly, because it will be your base for your academic review of the literature.
Okay. Well, there is an area which I could ask for some help. And there's a risk you might see it. I'm asking to be spoon-fed. But the areas, the key areas of policy implementation, leadership, and well, to a lesser extent, citizen engagement. Could you point me to some of the seminal readings?
Okay, leadership, any management textbook. I think I have a management textbook, and one on leadership. I could send you the names of that. In terms of policy implementation, now again, any text on policy implementation could do. Any basic. But I want to see the newest one, because if you go with dated things for your PhD, they will point out it's dated. So you need to go and do an academic search, Google